Hello technology enthused viewers, and welcome to my in-depth analysis of Ready at Dawn's new game, IP and engine with their first step into the AAA development. And as I said in my spoiler free review, link below, they have come heavy and hard with what is a superb piece of pixel pushing power, the likes of which are truly groundbreaking in its presentation. I have named these sections now Attention to Detail, as I will go in depth within the technology, design, aim of these games, and all things that you can only find at this level here with NX Gamer. So prepare for a detailed look at the Order 1886 and what it is the talented team at Rad have achieved while setting the new benchmark for real-time visuals.
We're going in. Most excellent.
With a huge quantity of post-processing, dynamic lighting, physics and heavily abundant alpha effects, you would think that the game may make concessions in its performance. But it has this area covered perfectly, with overall general play being a rock solid and stable 30 FPS presentation throughout cinematics and hectic gunplay.
Street clear. There are more in the courtyard.
Bugger me! It's on the stairs. Escaping.
Even when you have gorgeous looking buildings bathed in saturated sunlight with heavy use of HDR lighting, throw in some alpha effect smoke and specular lighting within the gunplay, it all holds stable and smooth throughout.
Target down.
Even close quarter satisfying brutal melee is not a match for the unwavering frame rate staying north of 30 at all times that the PS4 all seems to handle with aplomb. The only time it dips, and these are really small, is when you have huge GPU heavy scenes and large gigabytes of data are shifted between shots for mesh data, textures and physics on cloth, with it dropping 2 frames at a time. Similar to AC Unity, the physics jump as they are set into the scene. But unlike that game, this is pushing far more on the GPU, with much better performance within a native display. Outside of these scene changes, the engine and machine handles the visuals at the target refresh rate every 33 milliseconds.
That has infected our city will only grow more intolerable.
Well, the Lord Chancellor will thus agree to the urgency of a mission into Whitechapel.
Whitechapel is a matter for the civil authorities.
When the noble Arthur sought to contest for truage with the Roman Emperor Lucius, he did not trouble himself with issues of jurisdiction.
The game can very occasionally drop in action, but these only happen when you fill the screen with huge alpha and specular and physics fueled explosions. These can dip by 2 or 3 FPS for a second, with it dropping another couple if you happen to pull in a trophy whilst at work, as the hard drive or OS calls are made on top. Outside of the incredibly minor moments, it never drops a frame and is a solid performer 99% of the time, allowing you to enjoy the battles and deal with this rebel scum.
Need to reload.
Now this is where the gloves really come off, and Rad show just what they and the PS4 are made of, and they do not disappoint. As I do not want to spoil it for anyone, and I mentioned more in my review, but the opening section of the Order is really a defining moment in this generation, and I'm not exaggerating this when I say it's the new Gears of War of this generation. It truly looks, feels and is on another level compared to all other games that have come before. You spend so long at first questioning that this is real time, but it is, and no other game has reached this level of pre-rendered sheen before. The meticulous detail in each and every object is simply without rival at this point, with other games like Second Son, AC Unity not able to compete. From the way brass, stone, bricks, leather, steel all look completely accurate and believable, to other great techniques in the game. Refraining from using the pretty standard now SSR methods, screen space reflections, that simply use the depth buffer to mirror what is viewable on screen within the viewport, allowing the reflected area to be a puddle, floor or whatever else you want to bounce back at the player. With it being a very minimal to free CPU overhead effect, you can see the benefits, but it does have some weaknesses, even more so in a third-person game like this. The main faults with the technique is low sampling, i.e. a lot use half resolution, sometimes lower, So based on the pixel samples you take and cast, it can result in looking low quality at times. Interference and ghosting of edge detection with the side, top of screen and foreground objects and characters. But most damning of all is its wiping of the reflection when not on screen. Being originated by Crytek, you can see it best here in Crysis 3 on PC. See how they share cube maps with then an overlay of SSR when present. You can see how the soldier's reflection is lost when they are no longer within your field of view. And Crytek know this limitation by mixing it with static cube maps and blending them as needed to hide some of these errors. As like the Order, Crysis 3 has a fixed scene and lighting. Cube maps work well, but even having probes dotted around the scene to help with these, they will never work fully for viewable angle of static scenery and no dynamic reflections at all. Here Rad used cube maps as the scenery plus time of day are static, like Crysis 3, to the scene, so they can use much better quality reflections that are nearly but not quite accurate from all angles, but more than good enough to convince most of the time. They also allow good detailed reflections in shop windows or any other vertical area object that SSR cannot achieve without expensive planar or dynamic cube reflections needed, which then adds in culling and frustum issues and overhead. But to aid this, they have used a newer technique that looks to be derived from analytical ambient occlusion capsule reflections, with presenter proxies that are scattered across the game on pretty much all reflective materials, with them being attached to the characters and passing a depth pass within the forward render, allowing a full 3D representation of the character models, but obviously minus any colour samples that SSR can take from the reflected pixels within view. These can be brass, pan, steel bucket, door knocker, a bunch of teapots, and even the corner of a suitcase. These not only reflect yours and other characters in them from the appropriate level and distortion based on the curvature properties of the object itself, but from multiple objects at once. This could never be achieved with the SSR, with it also working on dynamic objects in the game that can be moved or shot, extending to the ground, having it to work on reflecting characters back with a depth view that again is far more appealing and achieves more than current SSR techniques. With the lack of colour depth and this process also most likely used to manage the ambient occlusion of self shadows on the models, its lack of colour information means within the world of brass and steel it works perfectly and accurately, but a mirrored service would not convince at all. Visually it really is in a class of all of its own, and to think within a year we have games that look like this. You will have and see so many sights throughout the story that astound. The environment, skin, which includes subsurface scattering most noticeable on ears and nose within scenes as you see here, but also in play within actual gameplay. Also the entire game is real time throughout with no video files even playable within the engine itself. With it supporting DX11 from its creation by Chief Technical Officer and joint founder Andrea Pacino and the team, that is fully their own creation and design and truly is a testament to the talent of such a small team. Moving on to another area it also excels at, its image quality, presented in the letterbox 2.35:1 ratio of a Blu-ray movie that in no way hampers a scene with a wide-angled FOV, all designed from its inception to be part of the presentation, also having the zoom dolly effect when in and out of cover to widen your view further. As expected, the 4x MSAA solution being able to achieve its near faultless pre-rendered looking and delivery on my statement of being the cleanest game this generation. With MSAA being bound to geometry only and a hardware feature within the GCN cards, it makes all edges of objects smooth and jaggy free. Even thin lines like the tension cables here are artifact free, which just adds to the pre-rendered CG looks. The only issue with MSAA is that it has no effect on textures, so things like specular edges or details within objects have to be rescued elsewhere. This is taken or managed through a combination of composite work applied to the textures and a temporal solution to manage the cases where those are missed, and overall it works superbly, with only very rare and occasional instances of sub-pixel noise appearing within some objects and highlight maps. But these notwithstanding, Rad have achieved their intended goal of eradicating the jaggies throughout. And this allows you to appreciate the art, effort and style on offer within the minutiae details contained. Every fabricated sheet, stitched leather glove, brass hook or even irrelevant flyer where even the ink catches the light with a raised detail from the normals and appropriate Fresnel calculation. And this stunning level of work goes further still, with skin types and blemishes visible across characters. The single mesh skin of hands fold and deforms at the wrist convincingly and realistically. Even when talking you can see that lips sticking together at times from the dry mouth. It is without rival, and the team's unwavering desire to render Victorian London and its inhabitants with no expense spared, be they human or animal, Again, trying to stay spoiler free for you, but here you can see the deformation of a mesh from human to werewolf is seamless and utterly convincing, with this animation system again allowing it to look like its target of pre-rendered. And this leap in animation is as large as the rest of the visuals. Never has the smallest nuance been evident outside of a pre-rendered movie, surpassing the pre-renders in games like Rise, Uncharted, with even the most subtle actions in place. Physical character movements all look to be mocapped of the highest order. Even NPC characters opening the gate or collecting fees all move with a convincing grace that belies its real-time render. Facial details are even more impressive. Eye movement, grimace, and even a discreet flirtatious eyebrow raise are all simply glorious in execution and implementation.
For me?
I thought you needed no looking after.
Very well.
Having the ability to see and feel a character's mood or intention brings so much more depth to scenes that are now a reality in this generation, even highlighting a mischievous but comical groped moment from Lafayette. The game has some emotional scenes across the range, and these are amplified even more by the physicality described here. But we must not miss another key set of ingredients to the game's composition of features. Post-processing is quite literally used to perfection here. Both a high sampled motion blur that tracks both camera and per object, with a direction and velocity map which again just further seals its movie look aim. You can see as I slow it down how each limb, object all flow with the relevant amount of noise based on their movement. Depth of field or DOF is also a lesson in execution, with it filtering in and out based on your viewpoint and foreground. With cutscenes it is higher quality still, focusing on the centerpiece in question and subtly diverting you from the other areas just like a director of photography would. With bokeh also used in parts, the entire collection added with a film grain and chromatic aberration that is very liberally applied to give that faux camera error. With light catching the dust on the digital camera lens, along with scenes being bathed in resplendent HDR sunshine in one scene and colour corrected in the next to evoke the appropriate mood for each section or scene. The dense areas of London look so convincing that you can almost feel the smog on your skin. The air looks thick with atmosphere, using volumetric light allowing the distant rooftops to feel further away in the pollution-filled skyline. This colour grading is again another technique used in movies that games are now applying. It is what gives films' directors a certain tone. Michael Bay loves oversaturated orange and yellows. Ridley Scott or Christopher Nolan use blue tones in many scenes. They help set the mood and ambience of a scene, but in games this can be achieved through the render process rather than movies with stage lighting and then further post-processing. This is why the E3 Uncharted 4 demo looked like it did. Totally separate colour levels falling into the dark midnight blues with a high specular. The opening of the Order 1886 is again the best example in the wild we have to see how all these come together to create the gobsmacking results. See how different the models and mood is from the flamboyant happy lighting here at Whitechapel and the gloomy blues on the London slums at dusk. Colour is a huge part of any visual impact, and Rad has excelled here throughout the game. Lighting is used throughout the game as much, with specular flashes bouncing off scenery based on angle and distance. See here as a muzzle flash from Izzy flashes and expands or fades as she moves back, or here as the enemy shot lights up Galahad and themselves as it travels, removing AO shadows and even casting one itself from Galahad as it passes. Shadows are also of the highest quality I have seen, and no more appropriate than in underground sections. Every object in the scene casts dynamic shadows from your own and others' light sources, enabling multiple shadows from one object that all employ umbra and penumbra process across the range. Now this is how light being occluded by an object is pure dark in the centre, being umbra, and then blurs or smooths out at the edge and the further away from the light source it is. Best shown here as I walk toward the railing to see how the shadows start thin and blurred, but as I get nearer it becomes thicker, more defined, with the edges becoming less and less blurred the nearer I get. This is also sees character shadows cast within 3D space into the distance rather than being a 2D projection of geometry within the scene like some other games use. With other lights casting shadows, it creates such an atmosphere in the scenes that you, or at least I, never wanted to leave, even though in real life I probably would have ran a mile. All of these effects merge into presenting what is the most cohesive and breathtaking game yet released this generation, bar none, with the audio work having just as much lavish care and attention, with each footstep clocking on cobbled streets or puddles, echoes that yell and reverb and occlude,
Fuck you, knights!
the satisfying thud of the rifle or cannon-like explosion of the duelist pistol.
Understood.
visceral impact of a punch or neck snap, to the distant snarl of the Lycans or terrifying voice as they hunt you down. The sound design is as well implemented and vital as the visuals. Voice acting throughout is not only of an equal level of the best in the business, and yes, I do include The Last of Us in that, but the recording, processing and integration are handled without fault, as is the score. Being such a strong and emotional piece that fits like a glove within the signature Knights theme, being one you will simply want to listen to again and again. But in some scenes and sections it adds an imposing fear or builds the tension as you anticipate what is to come. In the game's more emotional sequences, and there are a few that will even have the most hardened man's bottom lip quivering, its impact and use cannot be undersold. Good enough for me to now have it on my phone for any car journeys or quiet downtime moments. Like the rest of the presentation, simply stunning and faultless. Ready at Dawn have delivered a new era and benchmark in games. Right now, they are sitting at the top of the merging of technical and artistic skill that have been woven together within a world game and ultimately an experience that you have to see for yourself. In peace, with no spoilers, on a great sound system or headphones with a well configured large screen to really appreciate its beauty and stunning technical achievement. With the physics engine in the game that affects hair and cloth from wind and the force of a grenade blast and other weapons in the game, to its high quality digitally scanned textiles in the game that also include parallax occlusion mapping, adding even more depth and quality to the scene. And the single best physically based render ever seen in a real-time game. The shader quality in this is beyond compare at this point, and I shudder to think what's going to come out of Uncharted and Sony first party studios the rest of this generation. With Yibing Zhang being the shader artist working on The Order and with Naughty Dog. Throw in an engine that also has no loading times from the moment you start to the end, with no loading screen present. It really is a piece of work. If Gears of War and God of War had a baby, The Order 1886 would be its much younger, far more attractive and bewildering child that also defines not only a generation from a visual presentation point of view, but also marks the point that all other games will now be judged by, no matter the platform. As always, I hope you enjoyed this or any of my other content. If you did, then please hit the like and sub button. It really helps me immensely. Please leave your comments below. I know that everyone is talking about The Order at the moment for all the right and wrong reasons, and my review is up if you want to check that out and see what you think of the game. I only aim to inform, and I can tell you now my opinions in that game and the review are completely honest and unbiased. I do not care what anyone else thinks, and you shouldn't either. Listen to my views, inform yourself, but make your own opinions. This game, all I can say is, something you want to talk about and experience. It is on another level in so many ways. It would be a shame if people skipped it just because of naysayers everywhere. You guys and girls take care, and as they say in Victorian London, have fun, governor.
Lord Hastings is secure. Does anyone have eyes on Galahad? Air Command, do we have any sentinels above our position? Sir Lucas, this is Sentinel 3. We are 1 league north of Westminster Bridge and closing.
Sentinel 3, find Sir Galahad and keep your eyes on him without fail.
Understood, ma'am.